Okay. All right. Thanks, Gregory Althea. All right. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, again, Lord willing, we'll take a look at a study that I've labeled "With Child," and this is a little bit of a review. I think another study called "Woman in Travail." We might see a lot of these verses. We'll take a look at it from a different perspective. And what comes to mind? What do you think is in view when we read the language, for example, in Luke chapter 21, verse 23? Let me go ahead and post that. I may have to break it up. Luke chapter 21, verse 23. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Is this talking about people in the church having children? Woe unto them that are with child, like a woman maybe that is pregnant. But if we keep in mind that God speaks in what? God speaks in parables, right? So this is parabolic language, so we have to search the Bible, like always, to see what the spiritual picture is. Woe unto them that are with child. And I'm going to offer here that to be with child, we might look at some other verses here, but to be with child is looking at the church in tribulation. Is that surprising? I don't think it is. I think pretty much, I guess for the most part, when we try to factor in the ultimate meaning of these verses, at least from my perspective, it seems that God is always coming back to the church, the church. And then ultimately what happens with the church in tribulation, and then God bringing judgment on Babylon, and he calls for the believers to come out. So, with child, the church in tribulation. 1 Thessalonians 3, verse 7. And therefore, brethren, I want to look at the word distress. And I think we can tell from the context, those days. What is that talking about? It shall come to pass in that day, or in those days. Isn't God again talking about the day of the Lord? It's not just one day. It's a period of time, the day of the Lord. For in those days shall be great distress. 1 Thessalonians 3:7. Therefore, brethren, we were comforted over you in all our affliction and distress. Now, the church has always been distressed, has had affliction. We see this in the language of the Bible, but God, it seems, it magnifies when it comes to the day of the Lord. So ultimately, that's why I say, I offer that pretty much the whole Bible, as far as I can see, God is ultimately looking at what happens on the day of the Lord, in that day, in those days. But in all things, approving ourselves as the ministers of God in much patience. Believers, they had to wait on the Lord. How long, O Lord? In afflictions and necessities. That's another word that's synonymous also, I believe, to tribulation. In necessities and distresses. So that's the same word that we're looking at here in Luke 21 in verse 23. Lamentations 4 verse 3. Even the sea monsters. Sea monsters, dragon or serpent. What is that pointing to? What do you suppose might be in view there? The sea monsters draw out the breast. They give suck to their young ones. So can you see how giving suck seems to be the activities of sharing the gospel? Giving suck, just like those who buy and sell, no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark of the beast. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck. So the church, the corporate body, engages in the activities of sharing the gospel, and God refers to them also as children. So the sea monsters draw out the breast. They give suck to their young ones. So I think we're beginning to see perhaps the picture here, looking at Luke 21, that God is not talking about those in the church who have children, although there might be an implication there. But the children that are in view, I believe it is the church again. All right? Those who belong corporately to the kingdom of God. Lamentations 4:4, the tongue of the sucking child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst. When does that happen? Well, when God sends a famine of hearing in the land. The young children ask bread. Well, God can't be talking about the children that are going to church with the adult, because they're not the only ones that are seeking bread, are they? Are they the ones that are asking for bread? No. The famine of hearing is on the whole body. So the young children ask bread, and no man breaketh it unto them. Reminds me of another verse in Ecclesiastes. God speaks of them seeking bread in the street or something to that effect. But it's the same concept there I propose. Joel chapter 2 verse 16. Gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children and those that suck the breast. So those who suck the breast, there again I think the picture, God is using a variety of different terms, language to point to the collective body, the church, and in this case more specifically the church in tribulation. Those that suck the breast, let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber and the bride out of her closet. And I mentioned just now Amos chapter 8 verse 11. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. So this is when that's taking place, right? So this is taking place. Woe unto them that are with child. Why? Well, because there's going to be a famine of hearing. Satan exalts his throne above the stars of God. God already is judging the body. Judgment begins at the house of God. And even there, the church continues the activities of sharing the gospel, giving suck. So I think we can see that the famine certainly is in view here. Matthew 19 verse 14, Jesus said, suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. So we see that God speaks of the church again. He refers to them as children. They're coming to Christ, but yet we know that many are called, but few are chosen. They bow themselves, Job 39 verse 3. They bring forth their young ones. Now we're not going to get into this right now. In another study, I think I was offering some looking at the language of bringing forth, and I think we saw there I offer that the wicked also bring forth. But we're going to look, we're going to see a little bit later that the language also of bringing forth has to do with coming out of Babylon. And that's why I think we begin to see a woman in travail. Woe unto them that are with child. So the corporate body is looked upon as a woman with child, and she is about to give birth. And she gives birth to a man child. Revelation 12 verse 2, she being with child. That's what we're looking at here, I believe. Did I read? Yeah, we looked at Job 39:3. And she being with child, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child. Now this is why I offer that when God speaks of the woman with child here, I don't think it's looking at just the elect. It's not the elect that is with child, but rather the church itself. So judgment comes on the whole body. And then God uses a picture of giving birth now, I believe, to point to the redemption of that body. When they shall say peace and safety, sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child. Woe unto them that are with child. See that? So judgment is on the whole church. It's on the body of Christ. Hosea chapter 13 verse 16. They shall fall by the sword, their infants shall be dashed in pieces, and their women with child shall be ripped up. Right? Woe unto them that are with child. Their women with child shall be ripped up. So there again, I think we're looking at the church. Jeremiah 31 verse 8. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and her that travaileth with child. See that? I will bring them from the north country. The woman with child, and her that travaileth with child, a great company shall return thither. So we know that ultimately there is a separation. Let them both grow together until the harvest. So we're looking at the church in tribulation, and then ultimately or finally God allows the woman to bring forth. Jeremiah 31 verse 9. They shall come with weeping, with supplications. Will I lead them? I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters, in a straight way wherein they shall not stumble. And the verse after, oh, that's not the next verse. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Why did I post this verse? Oh, okay, that's a follow-up to verse 8, Jeremiah 31. So we see here that, first of all, we're looking at the woman with child, the church in tribulation. And then in verse 9, I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way. So that's the language of salvation when Christ is revealed. Isaiah 26, verse 18. We have been with child. That's also, I think, the language of Lamentations. The fact that God has forsaken the church, it has forsaken the body. So that's the language of judgment. It is pictured by a woman who is having birth pains. She is in travail. And then later on we read that when she gives birth, then she remembers no more the anguish. So that there again, I think, is the language of salvation. So we have been with child, we have been in pain. In pain. To be in pain is to be under the wrath of God, right? Spiritually. We have not wrought any deliverance in the earth, neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen. Babylon is fallen. Well, at this point, let me ask the question, is this tribulation or is this post-tribulation? Neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen. When does Babylon fall? Babylon is fallen, come out of her, my people. Babylon falls when God redeems the church. When Christ is revealed, God unseals the Bible. But before that, the church is travailing. Church is in pain. We have been with child. So there's no deliverance, there's no salvation in the earth. Isaiah 26 verse 17, like as a woman with child that draweth near, the time of her delivery is in pain, and crieth out in her pangs, so have we been in thy sight, O Lord. So yeah, the elect, they are in agony, they are suffering. They're still part of the corporate body. There's no separation yet. That's why, Lord willing, I don't think we can separate the woman here and say, well, it is purely talking about the elect. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares. So we see here the believers, they too, they are included, I believe. And the woman that is travailing. Ezekiel 9 verse 4, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem. Set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh. I offered in a study called Sighing that sighing has to do again with the church in tribulation. That's when they sigh. You know, we might be looking at, or there are those that are looking at the Bible, if we're not careful, Lord willing, to realize that God is speaking in parables. You know, something that sighing has to do with, oh man, you know, there's so much pain, or there's so much agony, there's so much distress going on today when it comes to the gospel. And that's how the believers sigh. Is that true? Is this what these verses are talking about? Upon the foreheads of the men that sigh. Is this looking at the demise of the church today and shaking the head and saying, that's too difficult for us to bear? That's not what I propose sighing is talking about. Sighing, I think, has to do with the elect enduring or going through the great tribulation. That's when they sigh. And that's what's in view here. God puts a mark on them because God, ultimately, He brings them out of Babylon. So even though they come into the great tribulation, judgment begins at the house of God, but they do not remain. Abu, hi, welcome. They do not remain. Hold on a second. Let me take away the red dot here for now. Oh, I'm sorry, not the red dot, the poster. Okay, yeah, we're looking at a study called With Child, looking at some verses in the Bible to see how they might relate to the Great Tribulation and God's judgment on Babylon. So, set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Well, the believers in tribulation, they sigh, they call on the name of the Lord. How long, O Lord? Right? Ezekiel 9:5, and to the others he said in my hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. And then God says, slay utterly. Now there it is again. This is another reason why I offer that to be with child. Let's see. Ezekiel 9 verse 6. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. A woman with child. So wrath is on the whole body, the whole church. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark. Now, if we only had this verse in the Bible, we might be able to make a case and say, well, the believers, there's no way that God could be referring to them as unclean prior to the separation. God sets a mark on them, and the sword is not going to come near them. Is that true? What about the verse? I think there's a verse in the book of Revelation that speaks of the elect, the believers. They're delivered from the day of evil. I think we see that in the Lord's Prayer. I'm trying to think of the reference there, but it's not coming to mind. But the idea, though, is that the believers, even though they come into the Great Tribulation, they don't suffer the second death. They escape the sword. And because they escape the sword, God here, I think, can speak of them as not as the sword not coming upon them. Does that make sense? We can't isolate that verse from the rest of the Bible. When we compare spiritual, we do see that the believers, they too, judgment begins at the house of God. So come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Okay, any questions so far? Any question? Want to take a look at in this next section, bringing forth. So first of all, we're looking at the church in tribulation. And now this woman is going to give birth. She delivers. Redemption? Yeah, I think so. Behold, the days come, the days are coming in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear, and the paps which never gave suck. Now wait a minute. I offered earlier in another verse that the sea monsters, they give suck to their little ones, their young ones. God is looking at the church collectively, but yet, and the church brings forth a man-child, but here God is saying that blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear. Well, you see, there again, I think, and we've talked about this in the past, God can give us a couple of different pictures. Messi and Gwen, welcome to the room. Looking at a Bible study here, not too much further to go, and after that we'll open the mic for a general discussion. God can give us a couple of different pictures, and yet we see them from, he uses a different language, right? Like over here in Isaiah 54 verse 1, Sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear, break forth into singing, and cry aloud, thou that didst not travail. Well, then earlier, God speaks of the church as travailing. Now we know that the elect, they too, they would have to be a part of that because they suffer from the same pain. They come into the Great Tribulation. But because they are delivered, because they come out of Babylon, there I think God speaks of them as if they never travail. That makes sense? And then we read in the Old Testament about the women who could not bear children. Can you think of some names? Anyone in the Old Testament? Some of the women that were barren? Sarah, yeah, Althea, Sarah, and who else? Who else can we think of? What about Leah? Was she one of them? Liz, yeah, Elizabeth. And even Hannah. I think Hannah, right? She was looking for a man-child, Samuel. So I think these are the ones that God, historically, I think he used these women as a type of the elect. Yeah, Leah bore 7, but that was before, that was after. Then God opened her womb. But I think before that, God allowed her to, or he allowed, was it Leah? I could be wrong. It's been a while since I looked at that. Who was the one that was hated? She was hated, and then ultimately, well, finally, Was that Rachel? Okay. Yeah, that might be the case. The one who was tender-eyed. Remember that? Remember the one that was one of them? I forget the name really. I thought it was Leah, and she couldn't bear while the others were bearing children, and then finally God opened her womb, and then she bore children. So there again, I think I've offered in the past that that's a picture of, first of all, the elect. They're not bearing because they endure. They're going through the tribulation. That's a time when they're not bringing forth as yet. And then God opens their womb. God opens the womb, and He causes the body to bring forth. And then now they bear children. So that there again, I think is looking at the church coming out of Babylon. But I'll go back later on. We'll look at some verses in the book of Genesis. So, sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear, break forth into singing. More are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife. So God there, I think, is differentiating between the church itself, the married wife, versus the believers. At first they were barren, and then finally God causes them to bear children. Genesis 16 verse 11, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Emmanuel. There, I think, that's a picture of the redemption of the body. True, historically, yeah, that did happen. The name Ishmael means God will hear. Well, why is God hearing? Who are the ones that are calling on the name of the Lord? So that eventually He would hear. How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge? Remember that, the believers? Revelation chapter 6. God will hear. So that's the language of salvation, individually as well as corporately, when God redeems the body. Thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. Affliction, I propose, has to do with tribulation, spiritually. Zechariah chapter 13 verse 9, we see this here. And I will bring the third part through the fire, will refine them as silver is refined, try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. So even the account of Christ being born, let's see, Ishmael, that's no, we're not. I thought for some reason I was getting this account mixed up with what happened in the book of Luke, the birth of Christ. But I think Ishmael is the son of whom? Help me out here. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 16 verse 11. Genesis chapter 16 verse 11. Yeah, the son of Hagar. And the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son. Let's go back to verse 10. The angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. Well, we got to go back even further. In verse 8, and he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. Well, that's kind of strange, isn't it? Because who is Hagar a picture of? Who is she typifying in the Bible? Yeah, the non-elect. But yet here, in verse 10, I will multiply thy seed. Yeah. So she typifies Jerusalem below. But God here, he says, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. Well, is that true? Does God hear the affliction of Jerusalem below? So there again, I think this is another picture, Lord willing, where God can use the unsaved to typify the redemption of the church. That's like putting a mark on Cain, lest any finding him would kill him. That's like Ishmael being circumcised at the age of 13, even though we know that God uses them in the Bible as a type of the unsaved church. So that's why, again, I offer that the church, the corporate body, in tribulation, the believers are there. So when we see language to this effect, it seems that God is going back. We're looking at the church in tribulation. Judgment begins at the house of God, so the whole body is suffering affliction, but yet this body is going to bring forth. And that's why I think perhaps that we can understand why God would speak of Hagar now, who typifies the unclean. She is going to bear a son, and this son, even Ishmael. And here, the name Ishmael, God will hear. So can you see how, there again, I believe God is using him as a type of the elect, or the church itself being redeemed. Okay. So what I'm offering here is that the idea of bringing forth, even in this context with Hagar and Ishmael, it seems to be looking at the redemption of the body. They cried with a loud voice, Revelation 6:10, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? So that's the cry of the believers prior to the revelation of Christ. Job 36 verse 15, He delivereth the poor and his affliction. So the elect, are they afflicted in tribulation? Yeah. Do they call on the name of the Lord? Yeah. Why? Well, because God has forsaken the body. I will hide my face from them. That's the whole body. Psalm 9 verse 13, Have mercy upon me, O Lord. Consider my trouble. That's tribulation, right? Affliction, which I suffer of them that hate me. Who are the ones who hate the elect? Who are the ones who hate the believers? Is that talking about those outside, the atheist? Those not wanting anything to do with the church? Yeah, exactly, Gregory. It has to be, Lord willing, it has to be the same church, the same body. Those, a man's foes, a man's enemies, will be they of his own household. So the enemy comes from within. We don't have to search outside for the enemy. The enemy comes with the gospel. The enemy comes in the name of Christ. And that's what makes the time of tribulation so deceptive, because God allows the enemy, He allows the false prophets to rule at this time, right? So, which I suffer of them that hate me. John 16:21, a woman when she is in travail have sorrow. The believers have sorrow. The whole church has sorrow and tribulation. But God had prophesied again and again that He would take away the sorrow. He would wipe all tears from their eyes. And that would only be relating to the elect. God gathers them. A woman when she is in travail have sorrow because her hour. What hour is that? It has to be the day of the Lord. Forcefield, hi, welcome. Oops. The hour, the day, and the hour. But of that day and hour knoweth no man. Is that talking about the last day? No. Is that talking about May 21? I don't think so. But of that day and hour knoweth no man. Day and the hour, again and again, God makes reference to the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is the tribulation and the affliction that comes on the whole church, the whole body. Same with the hour. So the hour has come. The church is travailing. But as soon as she is delivered of the child, she remembereth no more the anguish for joy that a man is born into the world. Now, what I believe is interesting here, I mentioned before that God, it seems, He can give us a couple of different scenarios, but then we're looking at the same picture. From time to time, He makes reference to the woman as the elect or the church. And this man-child that is born also, I think, is pointing to Christ, first of all, but He is the head of the body. So it is the believers now coming out of Babylon. That's the man that is born into the world. Notice the word joy, right? Rejoice, ye heavens, ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth. So joy comes, weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So as soon as the church is delivered, God redeems the church. She remembers no more the anguish. Why? Well, because now God unseals the Bible. The believers, they receive revelation. So there's no more anguish. There's no more sorrow. Now there is joy, and Christ is that joy. Now is the salvation, the collective redemption of the body. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. Well, is that a conflict? God speaks of the woman travailing and then having joy when God redeems the body. But now He speaks as if the woman is not travailing. Before she travailed. I haven't looked at that word, but you see. Maybe I should do that now. Before she travailed. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 7. Hold on one second. Actually, the word before, it's not there. It's starting with the word travail. Travail, she brought forth. So in other words, it seems that the translators, and I could be wrong on this, perhaps instead of translating this travailing, she brought forth, and even the word before her pain, let's see. Yeah, it simply says sorrow. The word pain there is the word sorrow. Sorrow, she was delivered of a man-child. Can you see what I'm offering here? I never really noticed that. And of course, if we look at this verse in the light of the whole Bible, we know that God is not saying that the believers would not travail. But I think the translation here might be a little bit, or might not be altogether faithful, because it seems that the word before is not found here. And that would make sense. In other words, the verse would simply be saying that travailing, she has sorrow, and she was delivered of a man-child. Can you see that? Alright, but either way, I think given the context, we do see that God there, I think He is talking about the believers coming out of Babylon. And she brought forth a man-child, Revelation 12:5, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God into His throne. Is that talking about Christ when He was born? Yeah, in a way, I think it is. Yeah, I agree, Gregory. I mean, it's not. If we want to look at the spiritual, it seems that it was okay to interpret this verse prior to the unsealing of the Bible. Matter of fact, a lot of these verses, many of us related them to the New Testament church age, or the church era. But now, I think the more proper way of looking at this verse is that it is the believers coming out of Babylon. So this child, the man-child that is brought forth, I think is pointing to the body of Christ that is delivered. And even though it says here, the child was caught up unto God and to his throne, what does that remind us of? What comes to mind when we see the phrase caught up? Maybe not the exact same language, but what about this verse here? What about Revelation chapter 11, verse 12? Does this ring a bell? And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. Come up hither. Is that a physical rapture? I don't think so. So there again, we want to try and look at all these verses in the light of everything else the Bible is teaching. And then we see that the child was caught up unto God into his throne. There I think God is speaking of the believers now coming out of tribulation. They come up hither. Now they go to be fed. Now notice here in Revelation 12:6, and the woman fled into the wilderness. Now wait a minute. Is this talking about Jerusalem below that was travailing? Or is this talking about just the elect? In verse 5, the child that is caught up unto God, there I propose God is talking about the elect. It is the believers. But can you see how that God here, he switches, he goes back and forth. The child could typify the elect. The woman can typify the elect as well. And this woman here who fled into the wilderness, where she have a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there again, I don't think this is talking about the New Testament church age. That's the way that I used to look at that verse. But in the book of Revelation, where it seems everything is pointing to what happens on the day of the Lord, it is the redemption of the body. So Revelation 5 is giving us one picture, and Revelation 6 is giving us another picture, but it's the same account. It has to do with coming out of Babylon. Okay, a short conclusion or summary, and then we can open for discussion. And I should be able to post this all in one. So to be with child appears to be the language of the church in tribulation. She is viewed as a woman about to bring forth, about to give birth. And that again seems to be pointing to the redemption of the body when Christ is revealed. Okay, hold on one second.